Building a business and life that blends contribution, fulfillment, and financial reward? Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the show for women in their 40s and beyond who are on this adventure. I'm Angela Rasmus, and I'm delighted you're here. Well, hello there, and welcome to episode 118 of the Your Next Chapter podcast. It's a Wednesday morning where I am. I'm in Sydney, and it is absolutely pouring with rain. It's one of those days where you're just really grateful that you can be warm and cozy inside with no need to actually go out into the wilderness, at least until this afternoon when I go and pick up my daughter. But I wanted to come here and talk to you today about an experience I've had in the last couple of weeks that got me thinking about something that's really important if you're looking at building a wholehearted business in your next chapter, which if you're listening to this, there's a pretty darn good chance that that's what you're focused on. So have you heard about the know, like, and trust factor, the KLT? You've probably come across that in business before. You've heard about how important it is that people know you, that they trust you, that they like you, that they're far more willing to do business with you if that's the case. And look, it's absolutely true. And just a couple of tips here around, how you build up that KLT. For people to know you, you've got to be visible. So you need to put yourself out there and let us find you. For us to like you, to feel that connection, that really brings in a concept called polarization. Now, I've said this quite often, is that you need to narrow your impact narrow your focus to deepen your impact. You're not here to take care of everyone. You're just here to take care of your people. So you focus on sharing your message in an honest and authentic and this is who I am type of way. And then the people who are attracted to that will connect with you. That's the like factor. And then the trust factor, that's about building consistent and congruent connections with people. Whenever they see you online, do they recognize you? Is the experience when I come to your website versus when I listen to your podcast or when I'm on your Facebook page or I meet you at an event, are you the same person? Is there consistency and congruence there? That's about the trust factor. And I would not deny for a moment that all three of those things are incredibly important. But wait, there's more. Now, it really occurred to me that this has come up in my thinking over the past few months. And it's the other piece which I think is incredibly important for us to embrace as business owners, as women who are building this sustainable business in our next chapter. Now, this is the seen, heard, and understood. The SHU Factor, if you like, SHU. And I think it's the most important thing that we can focus on. This is about getting off you and getting more into the shoes of these people that you're here to serve. Now, I was reading an article on Psychology Today, a website that I have a bit of a browse fairly often. I'm really interested in the psychology of emotions and feelings. And it turns out that being understood is considered to possibly be even more important than being loved. I actually think the two of them come together. But these guys did some really interesting functional magnetic resonance imaging. So a bit scientific, but basically what they did with the study's participants, they found that when they did this imaging of people who were feeling understood, then it really activated these neural regions that were associated with reward and social connection. They really felt great. Whilst not feeling understood activated these other neural regions in the brain that are associated with negative effect. In other words, feeling quite crappy. So having this feeling of being understood really goes all the way through. It's not just a mental construct. It's a physical all the way through our body. And that positivity is something that we'd really like to build with the people that we're here to serve. So I had a very specific experience of this in the last couple of weeks that I wanted to share with you, and this is what really inspired me to have this particular podcast episode. Now, about 10 days ago, I hired a wellness coach. And we just had our first session together. I actually wrote about this earlier in the year, that I had this newfound commitment to trying to be healthy and take good care of my body, so that by feeding myself well, by resting well, I found that my brain was just so much more on fire and I was far more useful to my clients. But there's a but. You can hear the but coming, can't you? I don't seem to be really good at keeping myself accountable. I am excellent at taking care of outside accountability. I will hit your deadlines every time. But myself, not quite so good. Definitely something that I'm working on. So what was happening was in my head, there was this idea sort of circulating around that perhaps there might be someone who could help me with that. Okay. Now, I've talked often about the buying cycle that we all go through, and this cycle is true for any purchase, whether it's a house or, a Diet Coke. The only difference is the speed through which you move through the cycle. You can go really lightning fast for little purchases, or it can even take years for big ones. I actually had a breakthrough session with a gorgeous woman yesterday who said, I've been following you for 3 years, and now she felt ready to step forward and move into this next chapter of her business. But I digress. Back to the buying cycle. So the cycle, it starts with you being not aware that you've even got a need. And then that awareness starts to lift up and you go into gentle research mode and you begin to compare opportunities or options in terms of how you could be helped or what you could purchase. And then you purchase and then you have the experience. Okay, now if your need isn't critical, if it's just a nice to have, but it's not absolutely essential, you can stay in that awareness stage for yonks. And that's what I guess I was doing, because I realized that I've got this knowledge, right? I know what I should, inverted commas, be doing when it comes to taking better care of myself. But I didn't find that it was a real thing that was happening without my getting assistance. So I was aware that there was a need there, but I didn't see it as essential. I was thinking, well, maybe you can just read another book or listen to another podcast rather than invest. But it was there in the back of my head. So that means if this same thing happens with you, there is a thing in your brain called the reticular activating system. Now, this is a thing that kicks in and it recognizes things when it's filtering and taking in all the information around us, and it will have you absolutely spotlight on a particular thing. So, for example, you're thinking of buying a new car. We just helped our daughter buy her first car recently, and the little Suzuki Swift, I'd never noticed them on the road, ever. They weren't in my brain. Now I see them everywhere. Now, that's an example of your reticular activating system in motion. So it was happening for me last week when I was casually doing a bit of Facebook scrolling, and then a post caught my eye. And that post was asking for a comment. I replied, connection was made. What it was about was a particular woman who was offering or asking the question, would you like a workout sent to you at the moment whilst we're all in this more of a lockdown stage? And I looked at her and I saw that she specialised in women in their over 50s. So I went, yes, please. And I replied to that post and a conversation started. Okay. Now, the next part is the piece that actually got me through the door. And let me explain. I accepted the invitation to have a chat with Leanne from a business called Uplift Health and Fitness. And that chat was awesome. When I was on there, she really prioritized understanding me rather than focusing on proving her own credentials. She really asked me a whole heap of questions. She reflected back to me. She demonstrated the empathy. I really felt as though she knew what was going on in my head. So I felt seen, I felt heard, and I felt truly understood. And this is where that polarization I mentioned earlier is so important. Leanne focuses purely on women in their 50s who are looking to build wellness into their everyday. That's me. That's absolutely me. There's where the understanding came. But she followed that up in a second scenario as well. When she actually emailed me after the session that we had, she summarized her understanding of my situation. And when I read that again, I guess if you MRI'd my brain, you would have seen those neural areas popping like crazy, because I really felt I had found somebody who knew what was going on with me. And that's what we're after, isn't it? We really do want people to see us, to hear us, to understand us, because that's when the true connection happens. Now, I'm a big believer when it comes to business modes, business models, that we want to build long-term relationships with clients rather than enact these short-term transactions with customers. And if you're wanting to build an intimate-based business model, which is one of my most favorite ones, it's certainly the one that I have, then this power of SHU, SHU, seen, heard and understood, is the most important thing that you can actually focus on. Listening deeply and feeding back to your potential clients so that they really know that you have a genuine understanding and a desire to assist them. So how do we get this magical SHU happening? Well, there's some pretty simple tips that I want to share with you to help you move in that direction. The first step is to go back and revisit your why. Why are you doing what you are doing? Why are you called to this type of work? Because in there is an innate desire to understand and care for your market. So go back and revisit that why and just remind yourself who you're here to help and why. I want you, number 2, to check your copy and your messaging on your website. Make sure you don't have what I call the 3 little pigs syndrome, which is we do this, we do that, we've done this, we're this. That's all about you. Okay, and that credibility part when it comes to bringing in the know, like and trust factor, of course it's important. But first and foremost, when people come to your site, when they stumble across your homepage or a blog or your Facebook page, we want to make sure that the language that you have there is very inviting and inclusive. It has you demonstrating the empathy that is so important to this. So some of the wording that you might use under those scenarios is, I understand how it feels to, or nobody should have to experience this, or like you, I've been frustrated by. And obviously that sort of insight only comes when you've had really good, deep conversations with people who are in your audience, in your target market, if you want to call it that, in your slice of the universe that you are here to help. So that's point number 3. To be able to check your copy and messaging and make changes to it, you need to have had deep conversations with your clients. Now, I like to call these coffee dates. You know, especially at the moment when most of us, or a lot of us, have a little more time. Life is a bit more roomy whilst we're all sitting at home. Even if you're usually at home working like I am, I'm still finding that the pace seems to have slowed down a little bit, and that's allowed me to have far more leisurely conversations with people. And in those scenarios, I am asking questions and I am listening deeply and taking notes and asking the particular question, and this is a biggie, what would be most useful for you? And in fact, when I've been talking to people that I've already helped, I'm asking that question as well. What was most useful for you in this conversation? Okay, take copious notes. It's really important to understand how to be useful, because that really connects to the SHU, the seen, heard and understood. So I also want you to go back and make sure that you are using the language of your audience within what you are saying and communicating. It's really important not to use our jargon. In our industries, we might find specific jargon that we use, or we may find that we're so accustomed to the developments or the tools that are a part of our industry that we just use them without explanation. What's more effective and what absolutely contributes much more to a person feeling seen, heard and understood is when you're utilizing their language. I was working with a client yesterday, and someone that's in the HR field, and the HR industry at the moment within this particular area, there's obviously a lot of uncertainty going on. Now, my beautiful client is having these really open conversations with managers, and a lot of them feel, fear, and they feel things like, is it going to go back to the way it was before? How will we actually go back to just working in the offices like we did, when this flexibility has allowed me to really get to know my client or my staff better? So these sort of questions and this sort of listening that my client is doing, she's then able to take that information and share it with other people in the field so that they too know that they're not alone with the thinking that they're having. And those rich and deep conversations really lead to that trust factor, because people have been seen, heard and understood. So who can you have conversations with? And then how can you take that language and weave it into your copy on your website and the future conversations that you have? That is the way in which connection is so built. So please keep on talking to people and building that engagement. And really the key to all of this is that focus is on being useful. Getting off ourselves, not worrying about how we're coming across and what our experiences have been, but more what your client is experiencing now. Because as that MRI showed us, there's pieces in our brain that go off like popcorn when we are understood. Now, what else happened in my story with my wonderful new personal wellness coach that I'm working with? Well, there's another piece that I'd just like to share before we finish up on the podcast today. A lot of people are feeling that perhaps now is not a great time to put ourselves out there. Perhaps people are not as available to invest. Well, the reality is that has happened. With a lot of people, they have been hit hard by this pandemic. That is true. But for many of us, we're as ready as ever to invest when we see a real clear growth benefit that's going to enhance our business or our life. So it's important that you think about the why this, the why now, and the why you when you're communicating out to the world. Explaining the purpose and the value of the specific service or the product that you want to share. In this case, Leanne was explaining how interesting it is to look after yourself at home at the moment, and how now is a really good time rather than waiting until spring, and why she was the perfect provider because she really focused on this particular life stage, which is where I'm at. So if you're concerned about that there's so much free stuff that's circulating at the moment and no one really wants to buy, remember, that's just a story that could hold you back. My reticular activating system is activated just like yours is, and just like the brain of your most aligned client. So when you're visible, when you can demonstrate that you are able to see, hear, and understand what's going on with those clients, there is always the opportunity to start a new relationship. So that's just a few insights that I wanted to share with you today. I hope that you can spend the time to have a look at the way in which you are communicating and connecting with the world, and making sure that that SHU factor, the being seen, heard, and understood, is right up at the forefront of you when you are interacting with those potential clients. That's how you build those long-term relationships that will help both you and your clients flourish in their next chapters. So have a lovely, lovely day. I look forward to talking to you on the next episode. Until then, take care. Thanks so much for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. I really do appreciate your time. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. And of course, my website, angelarasmus.com. If you enjoy the show, I'd love you to share it with another woman who's in the midst of business and life beyond 40. And if you love it, a review on iTunes or whatever app you listen in on would be fabulous. Reviews somehow impact that deeply mysterious algorithm and make it easier for the show to be found, which is always a good thing. So thanks again, and until next time, take care.